Hello, welcome to Lesson 12, Writing Equations. Today we are going to practice writing an equation whenever you're given the slope and the y-intercept, or perhaps you're given a graph. Maybe you're going to be given an ordered pair and a slope, and we'll also practice writing the equation whenever you're given a table. So let's start off fairly simple. If you are given the slope and the y-intercept, so let's say they tell you that the slope is equal to 2 and the b is equal to -3. So they've given us all the important parts that we need to write our equation. And just to reiterate from previous lessons, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, which means the slope will be in front of your x, and then the y-intercept will just sort of tag along at the end of the equation. Okay, so we're going to start off by saying y equals. That's easy enough. And then we look for the slope, and they told us that it's 2. So we would say 2x, and the y-intercept is -3. So we could say plus -3, but I prefer to say y equals 2x minus 3. Again, minus means negative. So they gave us the slope, and they gave us the intercept. Our job was just to simply put them into the equation. Pretty easy. All right, let's try another one. Okay, how about when they tell us that the slope is 1/2 and the y-intercept is a +4? Okay, again, fairly simple. It's very straightforward. We start off by saying y equals. We look for the slope, which is 1/2. We always put the variable x behind the slope. And since it's a +4, we could just say +4. Okay, so y equals 1/2 x plus 4. So when they give you the slope and the y-intercept, your job is to simply start off by saying y equals, put the slope in front of the x, and then let the y-intercept tag along. If it's positive, you could say plus that number. If it's negative, you could simply say minus that number. Okay, so hopefully that was a breeze for you. All right, so we talked about that method when given the slope and y-intercept, and it's the easiest of our 4 examples. Okay, what if they give you a graph? So they've given you an equation, they've plotted it on our graph, and they want you to write the equation. All right, so let's make up our graph. All right, so we have an x and a y-axis. Remember, y is your vertical axis and x is your horizontal. All right, so let me get my little tick marks on. All right, so let's say we have a line coming through these 2 points, okay? All right, so we've got this nice line. I can already tell that my slope is going to be positive because my line's going up and to the right. I can also tell you that our y-intercept would be -2. Why -2? Because it comes through the y-axis at -2. Okay? Our job is to find the slope. So we need 2 things to write an equation. We need the y-intercept, which is easy to see, and we need the slope. So if you'll think back a few lessons, to find the slope when you're given a graph, you simply count. So if I'm going to count from here to here, I would simply go over 1 unit and up 2. So let me write this. The y-intercept is equal to -2. The slope would be equal to, we went over 1 unit and then we went up 2. So we'll reduce that fraction. The slope is 2. 2 divided by 1 is 2. So we have y equals 2x minus 2 for our equation. Okay? So let me go back over those steps. So you're given a line. The first thing you can do is you can determine the y-intercept. Where does that line cross the y-axis? Okay, and it was at -2. And then our slope, we count from point to point. We came over 1 unit and up 2 to get to that point. So our slope was a +2. Let's try another one. Okay, let's try another one. This time, let's let our graph have a negative slope. Okay. So we have our x and our y-axis again. Okay. All right, so this time my line is going to be going down and to the right. So maybe I have a point right here. And I'll go ahead and give you the ordered pair. We'll say that's at 1, 2, 3. We'll say that's at -3, and then positive 1, 2, 3, and positive 3. Okay? So that's our ordered pair, -3, positive 3. We came over 3 units to the left, 1, 2, 3, and we went up positive 3 units. So let's say we have a point coming there, and then maybe a point right there. Okay? So I'm going to come through those points, try to keep my line nice and straight. Put the arrows on the end of my line because lines go forever and ever in both directions, okay? So now, let's go back over our steps. We have to determine where the line crosses the y-axis, and that's easy to see right here. This is our y-axis, and it crosses at +1. So if I'm going to use my m and my b, which is my y-intercept, is at +1. To find our slope, I have to count. So I'm going to count how many units over until I'm underneath that. So 1 unit, 2 units, 3. So I came over 3 units and I went up 1, 2, and I went up 2 units, okay? But my slope would not be a positive 2/3. It's going to be a negative 2/3. My shortcut is just to look and, count, don't put in any signs, and then look at the direction of your line. Since it's going down, I know that my slope is going to be negative 2/3. Now you may have been taught if you're moving left, that is going to be a negative number. If you're moving up, that would be a positive, and I'm still left with a negative 2/3 because we moved left and we have a -3 as our denominator. But again, my shortcut is just to count from point to point, and then I'll look at the direction of the line. If it's going down, it's a negative slope. If it was going up, it would be a positive. But it's your preference. So let's recap that little lesson. To find the slope when you're given the graph, you simply determine the y-intercept and then you count from point to point to find your slope. All right, so we stepped it up a level on the second example. All right, but we've taken care of that. So far we have learned how to find to write an equation when you're given the slope and the y-intercept, and how to write an equation when you're just given the line. So let's move on down to given an ordered pair and the slope. So this one will take us a little bit of time. Remember, y equals mx plus b, that's our format, okay? That's how we want to get it written into that equation. So if you're given an ordered pair and the slope, okay? What are we going to do then? So let me get to the correct slide. So let's say you're given an ordered pair of 2 and 7, and then our slope is -4, and that's all you're given, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to substitute in what we know into this slope-intercept form equation. So what have they told us about the slope? It's -4. So I would write -4 in place of m, okay? I'll let the x hang out. They have not told us the y-intercept, so we're just going to say plus b, okay? So that's the first thing I could have done, okay? I just plug in the -4. But let's go back. They did tell us what our ordered pair was. It's 2 and 7. So this is x and this is y. So instead of writing y, I'm going to write 7. Instead of writing x, I'm going to write 2, okay? So we're substituting in what we know into these variables, okay? Then I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and I'd have 7 equals -8 plus b. That's a one-step equation. So we're going to try to solve for b because we want to know what our y-intercept is. So we would simply try to get rid of that -8 by adding 8. We're doing the inverse operation. It cancels out, and I'm left with 15 is equal to b. So now we have discovered our y-intercept. So we have the two things needed to write our equation. Y equals -4x plus 15. And we had to do a little bit of work, okay, in that example. We wanted to know, we wanted to write an equation when we're given an ordered pair and the slope. So let's go back And let's look at our steps. We wrote down y equals mx plus b. That's our format. That's our equation. We plugged in everything that was given into that equation. We plugged in the slope to start off with. And then I went down to the next step and I plugged in my x and my y values. And then I just cleaned up that equation to solve for b. Once I knew my y-intercept and my slope, I was able to put them in this nice equation, y equals negative 4x plus 15. So that one requires a little bit of effort, okay? But let's move on to our very last example, okay? How are we going to write an equation when given a table, okay? So we're on our last one, when given a table. So let me make our table for us. We have an x and a y column, okay? And we're going to have negative 2, negative 3, negative 1, negative 1, 0 and 1, 1 and 3, and 2 and 5. Okay, so we have this table, and that's all they've given us. And they want us to write an equation. Well, I know I have to have the slope and the y-intercept. I'll show you the easiest way to find the y-intercept. If you're given a table and there's a value of x that's 0, whatever the value of y is in that table is your y-intercept, okay? But the value of x has to be 0. So we've already pulled out, we've pulled out our y-intercept. B equals 1, okay? We got lucky on that one. And now we have to do a little bit of work to find the slope, okay? So what you do to find the slope when you're given a table is you choose two x and y values. Since I already have 0 and 1 circled or boxed up, I'm going to leave that as one of my choices. And maybe I'll hop down here and I'll choose 2 and 5. Again, those are my ordered pairs. So I've chosen 0 and 1 and 2 and 5, okay? And then I'm going to go back to the slope formula, okay? Let me introduce you to the slope formula. Slope formula is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now that looks very complicated, but what that means is you subtract your y values on top, and I'm going to abbreviate that. Subtract your y's on top, and then you subtract your x's on the bottom, okay? And that will give you the slope. So I'm going to subtract my y's on top, 1 minus 5, okay? 1 minus 5. Since I started here for my first y value, I'm going to start here for my first x value. 0 minus 2. And I'm left with negative 4 divided by negative 2. All right, so let me slow down a little bit. I subtracted my y's on top in my numerator position, subtracted my x's on the bottom in my denominator position, and I'm left with negative 4 divided by negative 2, which would clean up or simplify or reduce to a positive 2. So now I have my slope and I have my y-intercept. All I have to do is put them in that format. So y equals 2x plus 1. Woo! All right, so when you're asked to find the equation or write an equation when given a table, that requires a lot of work too. Remember, determine your y-intercept. If they give you a value of x that's 0, it's easy to eyeball it. What would we do if they didn't give you a value of 0? So let's practice that. What would we do if, I'm going to change this back to 2 and 5, but this time, instead of having that 0, let's say it was negative 3 and 4, okay? What are we going to do now if we want to write an equation? Well, I still have to choose two ordered pairs, so I'll go ahead and choose those. I'll choose 2 and 5 again, and negative 2 and negative 3. I'm going to plug those into the slope formula, okay? Subtract my y's on top, negative 3 minus 5. Subtract my x's on the bottom, negative 2 minus 2. And I'm left with negative 8 over negative 4, which happens to clean up or simplify to a positive 2, okay? Okay, so now I know my slope, but I still need to find my y-intercept. So let's write down the y-intercept formula or equation. I know my slope is 2, And I'm going to choose one ordered pair to plug in for my x and y. I'll just choose 2 and 5. So y is 5, x is 2, and I clean up the math. 5 equals 4 plus b. I solve my one-step equation, minus 4, and I'm left with b is equal to 1. So now we have our 2 important numbers. We have our slope and our y-intercept. I simply put those together, and we have written an equation. Y equals 2x plus 1. So today's lesson was a little lengthy. I'll see you in the next lesson.